Professor Arun Kumar, you're on the other hand the complete skeptic of this government. You've been very critical of their policies. You've claimed that this whole talk of a V-shaped recovery doesn't take into account the fact that there are several sectors hurting, especially informal sector. Given what you've seen in the survey, do you believe that the finance minister has a lot of elbow room tomorrow to ensure an element of correction in this uneven growth, particularly reaching out to those who've been hurt the most by the pandemic?
So, Rajdeep, if you look at the CGA report of November, what you find is the expenditures by the government are far lagging compared to what they should have been at this stage of the game. Especially capital expenditures, only 49.4% of the total target for the year. And the fiscal deficit is way down at 46.2%, in November end. Now, there are 4 months left after November, and this can't catch up. So, the point I'm trying to make is that the demand generation from the budget has been lagging behind in the economy. And that's why I think, the organized sector itself has just about reached the Q2 level of 2019. There also, if you look at the Q2 data that was presented some time back, consumption is lagging, both government and private consumption. So unless the government begins to increase expenditures, where would the boost come from? Because exports by themselves are not going to boost it, because we have to look at the gap between the imports and the exports. That is what gives a boost to the economy. So by itself, it's not the case. So I don't think the rate of growth of the economy is 9.2%. It's actually much less. And I don't think next year it'll grow at 8.4%. It'll probably be growing at much less than 8.4%, unless the government begins to increase its expenditure, both capital expenditure and other expenditures. If you look at the budget that was presented for this year, the increase in the total expenditure was barely 1% over the revised estimate. So even that is not being achieved as far as the data to November is concerned. So I'm quite worried, that what the government is doing is unlikely to give the kind of boost that is required, because as people have been discussing, we need.
Let Mr. Garg respond to that. Mr. Garg, do you believe that the government could do much more in terms of expenditure to kickstart the economy, to push the growth, to create jobs, critically to create jobs, to reduce inequalities?
I think first there's been a lot of talk about 2 points. One, that the government has a lot of fiscal space which can be used for expenditure. And second, the government has done very well in capital expenditure. I think both of these things are important to answer what the government can do further. The fact that Mr. Arun Kumar pointed out that in 8 months, we have 2.75 lakh crores of the capital expenditure out of 5.5 lakh crore budget, less than 50%. And if you look at the trend in last few months, this is actually declining. So my sense is that when this year ends, you would not be able to do 5.5 lakh crore of capital expenditure, right? So placing too much hope on capital expenditure is perhaps misplaced. Then one thing we should also remember, that the capex of the government, basically in the transport sector, railways and highways, is largely funded from the excise revenues and what we call CRIF, this Central Road and Infrastructure Fund. Now that has peaked in the year 2021-22. With the global oil prices being very high, the government is under pressure, and it's already reduced the excise duties and taxes on the diesel and petrol. And going forward, perhaps it will have to do a little more. If that is what continues, the resource to fund the capital expenditure for the next year will actually not be available. So I would actually be seeing how the finance minister puts up the capex target for the next year. It will be very challenging, because from the normal budget, you can't find resource to fund the capex. Now, about the fiscal space, it's true, it's good that there has been good sort of recovery on taxes. especially on the corporate taxes and the personal income taxes. But again, if you look at the trend in last quarter, the results for which are coming up, the corporate revenues are also sort of tapering off. And we in 18-19, we had the corporate taxes of 6.7 lakh crores. This year, our budget target is only 5.7 lakh crores. We are even 3 years before corporate tax record, and we are borrowing 15 lakh crores for spending. Now, any fiscal space created by so much of borrowing in a situation where the inflation is high and the global demand, which came in the form of the exports, is now tapering off. So this year, in 21, the global exports grew by 10%. Next year, they are expected to grow only by 4 to 5%. And therefore, your export growth will not actually be happening next year as much as we do. So I see enormous challenges. Then we have also domestic challenges. For example, food subsidy is threatening to now go to 4 lakh crores. So I see a lot of fiscal constraint in the hands of government to sort of spend its way to prosperity or growth.